Good morning.
Good morning.
How many of you regularly meditate? Okay, there are hands sprinkled all throughout, and that's good. How many of you who didn't raise your hand that time have tried meditating but just had a hard time getting into it? Okay, more. And how many of you have known children to meditate? Okay, some of you do. And are any of the children who are present today children who meditate? No one raised the hand back there. Okay. And one of the difficult things when we meditate, especially if we've not got someone who's training us every step along the way, if we're trying to do it from scratch for ourselves, one of the difficult things is sitting still for so long, right? I mean, that's the way many of us understand. It's not the only way to meditate, but it's one of the very common ways to meditate, to sit maybe on a cushion on the floor, but to sit quietly and to get rid of the thoughts of what's going on and what you have to do later and all of that, and to empty yourself to a different kind of reality, a reality that's not thinking about the past or thinking about the future, but a reality that is this moment, an awareness of only this moment. And so this meditation that I'll guide you through today is one that allows you to move. It's not one that expects you to sit on a mat on the floor or with a cushion and a Zen monk maybe sitting there in the room with you in that space, in that very, very quiet space. This is one that if there's a little noise, it doesn't matter, because we'll be bringing ourselves back into this moment. And if we wander off, we just come back to this moment. So look around you. See who is around you. Notice who's near. And as you do, breathe. Realize we're all breathing from the same air. We're all sharing the physical reality, the space, the air that we breathe. And I invite you to get comfortable in your chair, however that is for you, and if you would like to close your eyes, you may, but you do not have to. And I invite you to wiggle your toes. Wiggle your toes, and as you wiggle your toes, feel the feeling of your sock against your foot. Feel that feeling of your other toes touching each other. Just feel it. Don't think about anything. Just feel what's there. I invite you to, if you can stretch your leg out a little bit, turn it, and just rotate your foot on the end of your leg. And feel the pull of the muscles as you rotate it. Feel where your foot is and what it's doing, and how your toes are still moving against your shoe as you're rotating your foot. Raise your hands up in front of your face. Move them slightly, move them side to side, back to front. And whether your eyes are open or closed, feel that difference against your face, the shadow that you can feel through your eye, but also the different feel on your skin of nearness and farness. Breathe in. Breathe deeply. As you breathe in, feel the air pushing your belly out. When you breathe out, feel your shoulders drop. Breathe in. Feel the air as it moves through your nose or your mouth. Breathe out. Hear the air escaping. Hear the person next to you as they breathe. Maybe they move in their chair a little bit. Wiggle your toes. Feel your toes and feel the shoe that they're in. Move your hands in front of your face and feel the difference that is there and then it's gone. Breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe in. Breathe out. In this moment, we are here. Our toes wiggle in this moment here. Our hands create a shadow on our face in this moment here. Breathe in. Breathe out. We are here in this moment. Breathe again. And if you've had your eyes closed, feel free to open them. Turn to the person to your right. See the person to your right. Turn to your left. See the person to your left. You are here in this moment, in this space, together. Now you just meditated. Our reading this morning is a very short story about stories. Something that the Native American writer Thomas King wrote as part of the introduction to his book, The Truth About Stories. It goes like this. There's a story I know. It's about the earth and how it floats in space on the back of a turtle. I've heard this story many times, and each time someone tells the story, it changes. But in all the tellings of all the tellers, the world never leaves the turtle's back, and the turtle never swims away. One time, a young girl in the audience asked about the turtle and about the earth. If the earth was on the back of a turtle, she asked, what was below the turtle? Another turtle, the storyteller said. And below that turtle, another turtle. And below that, another turtle. The girl began to laugh, enjoying the game, I imagine. So, how many turtles were there? She asked. And the storyteller said, I don't know, I really don't know, but it's turtles all the way down. And that's the truth about stories. Our lives are built on stories. Stories that are built on stories. Stories that we inherit from our parents. Stories that we inherit from our teachers. Stories that we make together in our lives as individuals, as couples, as a community, as a congregation. And the stories give meaning and shape to our lives. Now, because this service is intended to be an intergenerational service, the first part of our sermon this morning is going to be a story that I invite the children to come forward for if they would like to do so. Would you like to come up front? Okay, we've got a few coming down. Feel free to come on down. Good.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and any older children who want to come down are welcome as well. Okay, good morning. Maybe you could move over a little bit because I'm going to be talking into this microphone today. And I want you to be able to see and me to be able to see you, all right? So let's use our imaginations today. Is that okay? Do you like to use your imagination? What is your imagination? What does your imagination mean? Okay, maybe you have. Gabriel? Something that you're just thinking of. Okay, so your imagination is using your mind to think of something that is not necessarily what's out there in the world around you. You're making it up in your mind. Kind of like telling a story, right? Okay, so this story is a little bit strange, and so just go with it. Just have fun with the strangeness, okay? If it sounds really weird, that's okay. Just say, that's weird. All right? So here's the story. Farther back than we can imagine, a long, long time ago, the world we know was nothing but water. Can you imagine that far back? Okay, so you're in that time now. You're imagining back then. But far, far, far away, out in space, was another world. And it was a world kind of like our world now, but it was bigger, and it was so far away that you couldn't see from one world to the other. And there was a woman on that world. She was kind of a curious woman, and curious in more than one way. But mostly she was curious because she was interested in things. She was curious about things. And her name was Charm. Now, the birds on her world tried to convince her to be less curious, but it wasn't going to happen. That was just who she was. She was going to be curious about everything. As long as she had anything to be curious about, she was curious. But so she couldn't give up on this notion of why. Why is it this way? Or why is it that way? And so she wondered, why do I have 5 toes rather than 3 toes? Or 2 toes? She could have just had 2 toes, but she had 5. She wondered about things like that. And she was curious about the mud in the riverbank. She would walk along the river and play in the water, and the mud would squish up between her toes. And she wondered, why does it squish up between my toes when if I just walk out in the field, it doesn't squish up between my toes? And so she was curious about these things. And she also was curious about why she was interested in eating weird foods. Yeah, she just had this thing, you know. She just had to eat these weird foods. Can you think of something weird to eat? What's a hippopotamus would be really weird to eat, wouldn't it? A worm, right? Oh, you'd have to have a big appetite to eat a mountain, wouldn't you? Right, or like dirt, yes. Okay, so she was curious about why she was interested in eating all these weird things, and Rabbit said to her, well, you're going to have a baby. when I'm going to have a baby, I am just really ravenous to eat things that are just really weird, things that don't make any sense most of the time. So rabbit and fish and all the other animals told Charm that she needed to find something to help her with her cravings. And so Rabbit told Charm that when she's going to have a baby, that she goes out and digs the roots of the red fern, and that Charm should go do that too. And so Charm gets ready to go dig some root of the red fern to help her with her craving. But she gets a warning too. Badger tells her, be careful while you're digging. Don't dig too deep. And Charm doesn't pay any attention. She's not interested in not digging too deep. She's having fun digging the root of the red fern. And so she ignores the warning, and she digs and she digs and she digs until she comes through on the other side of her earth and falls into space. And she falls out into the sky and tumbles and tumbles and tumbles away. Now, that seems like a little bit a weird thing to happen, doesn't it? But our Earth is just water, and it's way off in the distance. And at first, Charm doesn't see it. Charm doesn't see it at all. But gradually, as she tumbles and tumbles and tumbles through space, it gets closer. And she sees it. There's a blue dot. There's a blue dot over. Oh, it's getting a little bit bigger. It's getting a little bit bigger, that blue dot, our Earth. And she's just coming in like for a crash landing. She's been tumbling so far and is going so fast. And the birds on this water world, water birds like ducks, they realize that if Charm hits going that fast, that it would be devastating. You can't fall that far and not hurt yourself, even when you're falling into water. And so the birds fly up and catch her and make her landing a little bit softer. But she lands in water, right? And Charm didn't come from a water world. She came from a world with land and is used to living on land. And so she asks, well, you know, I really can't swim very well. Is there anything flat that I can rest on? Anything flat? And the animals got to thinking, and the fish, and they all had an opinion, and eventually one of them said, well, we can ask Turtle if she can rest on her back. And Muskrat says, you know, this is going to have to be quick. This turtle better get here because this woman's going to have a baby. And it's going to happen any time. It's going to be really quick. She needs somewhere. And so Turtle comes, and Charm rests on the turtle's back. And she says, well, when my baby is born, where is my baby going to be safe? And we need some dry land. We need some land. And so the other animals ask, what's land? What's land? It was a water world. They'd never seen land before. And so Charm describes the land that she played on as a child. And so she said, on my world, where I came from, there was mud down at the bottom of the river. Maybe there's mud down at the bottom of this ocean. So the animals took turns diving to go down deep to the bottom of the ocean to find mud to bring back up. Well, they tried and they tried and they tried, and they couldn't find any mud. And it was getting time for Charm's babies to be born. And what was going to happen? Well, Otter was gone for 3 days and finally came back up with a mouth full of mud and spit it out, and the animals, other animals and fish kept it from sinking again. And Otter dived back down again and again and again and brought up more and more mud. And all the animals then lay the mud out so that it could begin to dry. And Charm stepped over onto the mud, which was becoming land. And she had babies, not one baby, but two. She had twins. And so they had this land that they could live on. And these babies were just opposite from each other. Some say that one was a boy and one was a girl, but definitely they were different from each other. One liked to do really active things, and one liked to be more quiet. One liked things that were smooth and flat, and one liked things that were all bumpy and hilly. And so between the two of them, the two babies changed that land from being just a piece of mud into plains and rivers and mountains. They changed into the Blue Ridge and the Alleghenies and the Shenandoah Valley. And together, all the animals, Charm, and her children created the whole world that rises up in the middle of the ocean. That's a little bit strange, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, now let's take a moment before we ask some questions to sing a song. And in your hymnal, the teal hymnal, page 1011, I will it's in two parts, and we'll just go through one time all the way through this time, and we'll come back to it at the end of the sermon. Could you give me the pitch? Yes, please.
The repeats.
Oh, yes, let's do the repeats. Okay, so kids, yes. How did that story make you feel about Charm and that strange world and falling through space and the water world? How did you feel hearing that story? Was it fun or was it scary? What did it do for you? Completely weird. Okay. Anybody else?
Jay, what did you? What? Fun. Fun?
It's fun.
Fun.
Oh, fun. All right. So do you believe that story actually happened? Okay. I don't see anybody saying yes. There are a whole lot of shaking of head up here. Nobody believes that actually happened. What do you think about the way Charm and the animals acted toward each other?
I
if you didn't hear that, he said they were nice to each other, and maybe if we were more like that in our world, the world would be a better place. Very good. Okay, so did it matter that we had a rabbit and an otter and all these different animals, and the turtle and the ducks flying up? Does it matter that they were different from each other? Okay, they're shaking their heads. It doesn't matter at all that they were different from each other. Okay, Charm and the animals had many adventures and did many different things together. And the song we just sung is Return Again, return to who you are. So, do you think they returned to who they were? Do you think something about what they did together was part of who they were already? It's like a team effort, that's right. Okay, so how did they return to who they were?
When they were before Charm came, they were all mean to each other, and they were drinking. They were nice because they had finally figured it.
Okay, so you're seeing a progression in the story. They're learning to do something, and that may be that wasn't part of what we heard, but you're using your imagination, and that's good. That's the way you build meaning in stories. And so in Charm's story, there is room for the earth, on the earth, for all kinds of people, all kinds of animals, animals who are working together and who are finding a place in the world where they can belong, where their needs can be met. Charm is curious, and her curiosity doesn't change. That keeps going. So that's one way she returns to herself. And it leads to her giving birth to two really interesting children who did some really interesting stuff. And it gives us meaning as we look at the story. Okay, it's not just a story, is it? It lets us know something about ourselves too. We can be around people who are different. Pardon? It's a teaching story. It's not just a teaching story. It's a fun story too, but it is a teaching story. And so I thank you very much for coming down to the front and listening to my story. And if you would like, you can go back to your seats and we'll tell the grown-ups a story now. Have you ever noticed how every story starts in the middle of another story? People who study stories and other forms of literature have a fancy name for this that's an ancient name, in medias res, in the middle of things. Greek epics start in the middle of things. Homer's ancient epic, the Iliad, begins Achilles' wrath to Greece, the direful spring of woes unnumbered, heavenly goddess, sing. That wrath which hurled to Plato's gloomy reign the souls of mighty chiefs untimely slain. We begin, and already the big action of the story is described as something that's happened. We're in the middle of things. Clearly a whole lot has happened and when Homer starts singing this amazing poem. Or how about the beginning in a biblical sense, the big capital B. In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void. It feels like an absolute beginning because of the way our culture has understood this mythical language, this story But the Hebrew begins with something a lot more ambiguous than an absolute beginning. And it can't really be translated very well into English. And so we have God and we have creation. But when did God create? Well, it was in the beginning of God creating that God created, and it's this circular thing that really doesn't fit on a nice, neat timeline. But it's in the middle of the beginning that the beginning begins. It doesn't give us anything absolute. From the Universalist side of our Unitarian Universalist history, there's a story that is perhaps less majestic than a Greek epic or the creation story in Genesis. But nonetheless, it's a compelling story of beginnings. It's the story of John Murray and Potter's Church. And I'm sure several of you in this room, if not all of you, have at least some familiarity with that story. Murray was born in England in 1741, and his religious thinking moved from the Calvinism of his upbringing to Methodism, and then the Methodists kicked him out because he discovered this theological idea called universalism. The idea that God isn't going to damn people to hell the way he had been taught all his life. And the man from whom he learned universalism encouraged him to become a preacher. And he started preaching. But then things happened that no one would have expected that changed things. Murray's son died as an infant. Murray's wife died. And soon after that, 4 of his siblings died. And if that wasn't bad enough, then he was thrown in debtor's prison. One of his brothers-in-law bailed him out, took care of his debt, and allowed him to begin his life again. And in 1770, he decided that he just wanted to pass into the oblivion of time by going to America. He was not coming here to make his fortune and a great name. He was coming here to escape, to get away from all of that horrible stuff that was so heavy on his life. The ship on which Murray was traveling became grounded on a sandbar off of New Jersey, near Good Luck Point. The captain sent Murray ashore to look for provisions and supplies. And so while he was gathering these supplies, he runs into Thomas Potter. Thomas Potter had built a chapel on his land, and he was looking for itinerant preachers to come along and fill that pulpit and preach to him and his friends and people in the area. And, you know, this was a kind of world where you could just do that, evidently. And he found out that Murray had been a preacher at one time in his life. And so Potter insisted, you know, you have to come and preach at my church. And Murray said, no, can't do that. You know, the ship's grounded now, but the water's going to rise again and we'll be taking off, and I have to be at the boat. I can't be on land lost somewhere when the boat takes off. I need to go where I'm going. And somehow or other, though, Potter got Murray to promise that Murray would preach on Sunday if the ship was still there on Sunday. So Sunday comes, and Murray preaches, and it's the message of universalism, the message that God is love, that no one faces eternal damnation. And it was not a totally unknown message. Even in America, there were people already preaching this, but Murray's arrival is treated as the Universalists told it, almost as a miracle story, you know, that there was this change in the weather and the ship got grounded, and it was providence that Murray was there to preach at Potter's Church. It was such an important story in the telling that Universalists counted that day of preaching in Potter's Church as the day of the beginning of Universalism in America. So in both of our stories today, in the Charm story and in the John Murray story, both Charm and John Murray had a life before they met their destiny, before they ended up somewhere unexpected and had interesting things happen to them. Thomas Potter and the people around had a life of their own already before Murray arrived. And the animals of Waterworld had a life of their own before Charm dropped out of the sky and plopped down in the ocean to have her babies. And it was in the relationship that grew in the encounter between people who had their own histories that something new, something wonderful began. It was all grounded in past experience. Return again. Return again. Return to the home of your soul. John Murray's new beginning took him back to preaching. And that good news that he preached was that all would be reconciled in the end. And we come today with our histories. Our personal histories, your history as a congregation, my history of preparation for the ministry, work as a chaplain, doing internships in congregations. We have our own histories that bring us to this point. In our meditation for all ages, we called our minds back to the present. The pull of muscles, the movement of our toes against socks, the feel on our face of shadows. It is in this current moment that relationships form and grow and are nurtured. It is in the current moment that we experience each other and feel what the other is like in this life. When we come to the end of this week that I am with you, you and I, will reflect on this candidating week. We will evaluate what we have experienced, what you have experienced of me and what I will have experienced of you. But today is not that day. Today we experience the splashdown. Today we experience being set ashore on an unknown place. So let us be present to each other so that we may later remember this time together. This time may be a beginning that we will tell children stories about in time to come. So I invite you to join together, this time singing in round, Return Again. And we'll start right in our two sections because you already know the song. And it's 10-11 again. So if this side will be the first part and this side the second part. So you sing through in a repetitive way and then you start. Okay, let's try this.